The Last of Us Part 2 released last week and has had a difficult launch period in terms of reception. While being heralded as a technical masterpiece, the game's narrative has been called into question by a lot and has become incredibly controversial. So let's talk about one of the more profoundly controversial scenes, the opening scene where Joel is murdered, and how it doesn't make any sense. To offer context, Abby ends up killing Joel for the murder of her father, who was the surgeon at the end of The Last of Us Part 1. Since then, she's been on and off again searching for Joel until she finds him by luck and viciously kills him. So let's analyze the series of events and see how it just doesn't make any sense how Abby was able to successfully kill Joel. First off, Joel and Tommy locate Abby by luck. Believe it or not, this is actually the most believable of the entire sequence of events. Yes, the chances that Tommy and Joel would be out on patrol at that location is lucky. However, Abby's presence there isn't. After locating Jackson, Abby decides to enter the city alone after Owen decides not to move forward with their plan after seeing the settlement's defenses. Abby throws caution into the wind and heads into the city, using, as far as I can tell, major roads and paths. Her meeting up with a patrol was expected as she traveled through residential areas, and it's clear with an established settlement like Jackson would constantly patrol areas since they would be ideal for bandits to use and infected to hunker down inside. So Abby meeting Joel and Tommy is possible. So what about the following events? After encountering a horde, Joel and Tommy cannot stay at the lounge and cannot return to Jackson due to the storm, since their horses would not make the journey. Instead, they decide to take Abby's word about a base where her and her people are hiding. Many have argued that this goes against Joel's judgment, and they are right. In Part 1, it's clear that Joel has become more compassionate, as shown in an earlier scene where Joel sings to a younger Ellie. Those who played Part 1 know that Joel was reluctant to sing to Ellie despite them having a close relationship by the time he told her that he wanted to be a singer, showing that Joel's walls were coming down and he was beginning to open up even more. And this scene took place 4 years before everything transpired, so Joel may have gotten softer in those 4 years. Seeing someone about to die and saving her, especially Tommy, does seem like something they would do. What follows doesn't make any sense. Okay, before we dive into the next scenes, let's list Joel and Tommy's skills and previous experiences. In Part 1, Joel confirms that he was a hunter, which means he is well aware of what an ambush looks like. He's also a smuggler and an enforcer, which means Joel has a good sense of reading people. Lastly, at the beginning of The Last of Us Part 2, we see that Joel did not sneak past the Firefly soldiers guarding the surgical room. He slaughters all of them, and these were well-trained military soldiers, which means Joel, by experience, is self-taught and an extremely effective soldier. Now let's look at Tommy. Tommy was a hunter like Joel for years before joining the Fireflies, which means he should have had the same training and understanding as Joel when he was a hunter. After leaving that life behind, and Joel as well, Tommy was trained by the Fireflies in combat and torture, as the game confirms this when Ellie and Dina was in Eugene's hideout, who was another former Firefly who worked with Tommy, making Tommy just as capable as Joel when judging a situation. Tommy has also spent a good deal of time helping build an effective settlement, which means he has a good head on his shoulder when it comes to reading people to prevent bandits from infiltrating Jackson. Seeing that Part 1 takes place 20 years after the outbreak, that gives Joel 20 years of hunter and smuggler experience, and Tommy 20 years of hunter, Firefly, and settlement experience. So we've established that both Tommy and Joel have extensive experience as hunters and soldiers. When Abby takes Joel and Tommy to their base, the brothers would have immediately read the room, saw what these people were wearing, and made the connections that they were not civilians or traders, but in fact military trained, which should have raised a lot of alarms. In fact, Tommy's observation of their WLF patches was the first clue they had when gathering evidence to track down Abby's group. But the biggest red flag would have been their numbers. No way would Joel or Tommy ever consider entering an enclosed area where they were outnumbered by people they did not know. The next issue is when Joel and Tommy actually entered the room. If you noticed, Joel heads into center and gets surrounded, something a hunter and a warrior like Joel would never have done. Even if he was more compassionate, it's extremely doubtful Joel would ever put himself in a position where he was surrounded by strangers, considering 20 years of surviving. Tommy, a military-trained soldier, also places himself far from the door and also gets surrounded. Even more strange is that Tommy seems so relaxed, something a former Firefly and Hunter would never have done, surrounded by strangers wearing military gear. All of this goes against everything these brothers have done to survive and their previous experiences. With all these red flags placing Tommy and Joel in this position, it's just too perfect. The brothers should have been aware of the situation the second they entered that base, or at a minimum would have never put themselves in that position where they are surrounded by strangers. It was too perfect, and by extension, extremely unbelievable.